You are listening to Beyond the Verse, a Star Citizen podcast. A show dedicated to Cloud Imperium games, Star Citizen, and Squadron 42. Whether you fight, explore, unite, and/or trade, we bring you news, updates, interviews, reviews, and analysis. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a pour of Radegast, and join us as we go Beyond the Verse.
Launch sequence activated.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Verse, Star Citizen podcast. I'm your host, Solus, and this is episode 60. We are wrapping up Invictus launch week and getting ready for two patches coming down the pipeline. It's a super exciting time as we prepare for 4.0 and Q3. So on today's episode, we will be reacting to the Invictus finale. We're going to be going over those two patches. So 323.1 Alpha is going to be XenoThreat, Jumptown, and updates to an exploit that we'll get into here in a little bit. We're going to be covering 323.2, which will be going into the Evocati in the next couple of days for the persistent hangars and cargo hauling and cargo updates, as well as item banks, I'm pretty sure. But we'll get into that in the roadmap update as well. Then we'll get into the Galactapedia update and a lot more. So welcome in. Since our last episode, man, we had Memorial Day weekend. I believe I recorded late Friday night, which entered into Memorial Day weekend. So I hope you had a good one. To all the veterans out there. No, it's not Veterans Day. But I want to just say happy Memorial Day to those surviving the unfortunate loss of veterans around the world. So we had a swim party at a friend's house. It's like an annual thing, so lots of water. We had the Kalahari Resort, which y'all heard about in the last episode, straight into Memorial Day swim party. We've had a lot of water events, to say the least. So I hope you had a good one. This upcoming weekend, actually tomorrow, I go into a camping trip, and has nothing to do with Star Citizen, but I'll do a little tie-in as to why it matters. But I have a camping trip with some of the men that I serve with on an executive protective service team, personal security detail team, whatever you want to call it. We're going to go camping at Hidden Falls Adventure Park. It's going to be amazing. But that kind of ties into the latest sentiment that I've had. And I want to start today's episode by kind of apologizing for the overall sentiment of last episode. I stand by everything I said. I don't retract anything that I said. But the sentiment, the spirit, the mood that I was in, I was very hard on the Drake Ironclad, and I don't know if it deserved it. Yes, I feel like it is three caterpillars attached to each other. Okay, fine, whatever. At the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. There are many other ships that have kind of done that, whether they're variants or a little bit larger of something. Like a good example would be the Origin series, the 100 series into the 300 series. It's basically the same damn ship, just with a space to walk. So again, I want to make sure that I give it a fair shake. I also want to just completely be transparent. I love hating on Drake. If you're in the Soul Provision org, you know this. If you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you know that I love hating on Drake. It's the homeless person's merchant, vendor, whatever you want to call it, manufacturer. There you go. But at the same time, isn't it one of the most practical? And you're going to hear me pivot. Like, this is a major pivot for me. But I keep going back to the damn Caterpillar for transporting goods. I keep going back to the Cutter Rambler as like an everydayer. I keep going back to the Drake Vulture. So as much as I want to dislike Drake, I don't know. It's probably the more practical. So there you go. I am nothing but flexible. I'm not stuck in my ways. I can adapt and learn, but I won't say it's the best. I won't say it's middle of the road, but it probably is the most practical. If you've got some money to spend, or if you only have a little bit of money to spend, the Cutlass Black is probably still your best bang for your buck. Best starter has got to be the Cutter, right? Your salvaging ship, that's probably the most fun loop, in my personal opinion, continues to be the Drake Vulture. It is what it is. So the thumbnail for this YouTube video is the Drake Kraken. I mean, that will be, I think, the game changer for me. I cannot wait for the Kraken. As a veteran myself, as somebody who loves going to see memorials, like military memorials that still exist out on the water, the USS Lexington is one of my favorite places to go to. I love that carrier type ship. And this is basically a real life carrier up in space. So I think it deserves. I think Drake deserves a little bit of a pivot there. So wanted to start with that. But let's move into the show. Let's get into from the community as we go through just a little bit of polls. Didn't ask too many polls this week, but we do have a couple to get through. So let's roll.
Incoming message.
As always, first we go into episode 59's polls and Q&A. So at the end of last episode over on Spotify, I asked, did you buy the new Drake concept, the Ironclad? And so out of 10 votes, we have kind of a mix. The options were yes, no, but you will eventually, no, and will not be. And so out of those 10 votes, we had 5 saying yes. That's 50%. That's how math works. We have 5 saying yes. We have 3 saying no, but they will eventually. And then we have 2 saying no and will not be. So real quick, I created a tweet that reminded listeners, viewers, fans of the show that a best practice is to purchase a ship and immediately, if it's a concept, purchase a ship, melt it immediately so it exists in your buyback and you kind of always have the chance to pick it back up. But then you can use those store funds or store credit to purchase the ships that you can fly until that concept ship comes out later down the road. So here is like the prime example. Since we're talking Drake, let's stay with Drake. The Drake Kraken. You're going to spend, I'm going to make this up because I don't have it off the top of my head, but you're going to spend, let's say $1,500, right? $1,500 on a limited hull ship. It's not going to be ready anytime soon, not even for the foreseeable future, right? So you get it, you don't sit on it. Even if you like the loaner ships that come with it, even if you like it, don't sit on it because that's $1,500 that's just gone when you could be living off that for the next 2-3 years. So you take it, you melt it, you put it into buybacks, don't touch it ever again. But now you've got $1,500 that exists inside of your store credit. And then at that point, get every single ship that is coming out. So all concepts, so Zeus, let's just stick with one example. So Zeus, get it whenever it's available and then melt it immediately. You didn't spend $1 more, but you're locking in those cheaper prices, right? And you're also locking in whatever concierge livery. I keep being told it's livery. I'm going to stay with livery because I'm stubborn. Paint job. But you can lock in whatever special that comes with it at that time. So I want to reiterate that is a best practice. And then there's also the tried and true, just buy what you want to fly. And don't worry about the game. There's a CCU chain game. There's what I just mentioned, the store credit game. Just buy what you want and live life. but it did catch fire. There were, almost, I think, 8,000 to 9,000 views on that tweet alone. It's just what I would recommend. If you're a new player and you had the money to spend and you got, the Idris, cool, melt it immediately. Live off that until the Idris is available to fly. I digress. So there's the polls. Let's go into the Q&A. Excuse me. And I asked, what are your thoughts on the discontinuation of the F7 Hornet Mark 1 series? I don't necessarily retract my sentiment there. I stick with my sentiment. I stick with what I said. I don't need to apologize for the sentiment for the F7 Hornet Mark 1. It still, to this day, feels a little gross. It feels a little kind of under the table. Why are you doing this? Again, you're going to hear some of these responses that are kind of sharing this other sentiment of like, yeah, you support changing things, and once they improve ships, why, improve the other one, or why continue with the other one. However, it doesn't explain why they would push, this is your last chance to get it. Spend a shitload of money. Spend $650 to get every single F7 Hornet Mark 1. You got to do it now. Got to do it. It's a push. When it's going to still be available in the game. That feels dirty to me. So anyways, that was the sentiment shared in episode 59. Let's go to the responses. Share my screen for those of you on YouTube. Let's go to those responses and read them. So first one, Dakota Riley, I think you're always the first responder. So I would just thank you. Thank you for always being that engaged. But here we go. Quote, I think that discontinuing the ship in game makes sense when there is a new version, but maybe they should use the opportunity to sell used ships or allow players to sell ships on the store as used. Yeah, I think there's kind of a black market. I don't want to even go down that road on this podcast, but there is an unfortunate under the table black market kind of selling process that the gamers are doing. So just be advised of that it does exist. But I think what Dakota's saying is like actually implementing that loop or that process or operation officially, like within the game. I like it. I do. I do like it. But like the newer version thing kind of bothers me. Not explicitly what you said, but just in general, a newer version. Okay. I can think of many examples that are in the ship lineup that has quote unquote newer versions, like all the variants, right? And again, I go back to the Origin 100, 300 series. Yeah, they're different ships, but they're just a little bit of an upgrade. So are they just going to discontinue the 100s? I think there's a lot of those examples. And so I don't know. I can see it. I can see both sides of the coin. But I do like the direction you're going with the allowing players to sell ships. Yeah, you can buy it. What a great idea to like put it back on the market for a cheaper discount. And it just transfers that SKU from one player's account to another. Why not? I like it. Now you can still gift. I don't know if that's necessarily what you're what you're saying or what you're recommending, but you can also gift. Like if you have ships in your hangar, you can gift, but that's outside of the game, and that's more I don't know, I feel like that's probably a different topic. But let's go to the Wandering Marauder as quote number 2. Agree with Dakota, evidently read the quote, but agree with Dakota, it makes sense. There's a nice opportunity with the used ship idea. Sell them for less in real life or in game, but make their maintenance costs higher due to hull age. I like it. I like that dynamic. I like the consideration. Make it cheaper to buy, but more expensive to maintain. I like it. And as I just respond to this in real time, I don't know if I see a negative in that. Yeah, no, I like it. They need to find a way to cancel or block the black market, though. I truly think as long as that black market exists, I don't think you're going to see a lot of success with something like this. All right, Nick. I see it as more of as a stop to the pledge sales of the ship. Since they said it will be earnable in the game, it's not that big. I am more interested in what the direction is with these quote antique ships. Yep. I guess my response to that, just I don't feel like I need to reiterate. I'm just going to, regardless. It's more just, so why do it? What are they accomplishing by ending the pledge sales, other than to push for a huge spike in sales during Invictus launch week? Having a JPEG, having the SKU available to buy on the website, having a JPEG present on the website, it's no bandwidth on their end. It's not like it's a major lift, for them to execute. So there's got to be an advantageous reason why they would pull it off the pledge store. And I think that is what I'm getting hung up on, right? But yes, I would like to learn more about the direction of these older ships. Yeah, you can get them in game, but what's the so what factor? Why get them in game if these newer models are just so much better? And the last quote from Sean Donovan, quote, "I'm sad to see it go, but I think the variety of ships will fill the gap that it leaves behind." And to add to what Sean just said, I will say they did say that the F7, the Mark IIs, will have every version that the Mark I's had, right? So like the Mark II Ghost, it's like the first one that came to my mind. You're going to have it all Mark II Ghost eventually. So yeah, what are you going to do with the Mark I Ghost? Why have it if there's a Mark II Ghost? So I just thought it was a good dialogue. I said something about it last episode. Clearly, there was a lot of drama behind it in the community, and we just spent probably the last like 5 minutes talking about it. It's worth a conversation. It's worth the debate in my mind. Actually, I was going to go to my Twitter polls, but before I do that, we're on the 31st of May. So usually at the first of each month, we go through the performance of Beyond the Verse podcast, but we're not doing that this episode. But I do want to take a second and celebrate the backers for this podcast. We do this from time to time. I'm going to go ahead and do it yet again, sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube. We do have 8 individuals that have chosen to spend their disposable income to support this podcast directly through Spotify. And just going through those names, we have Dustin Thames, Will Spicer, Dakota Riley, Brandon Lawhorn, Marcus, I do this every time, Roy, fix me, please. Jacob Harding, Captain Trips, Dreamer of Days. So again, thank y'all so much. Most of these, in fact, I think all of them are avid Soul Provision members as well. So again, thank you so much. Helps us keep the lights on, and helps us keep like one advertisement per episode as opposed to having multiple advertisements, just to keep this, like I said, going strong. So thank you. Really do appreciate it, sincerely. To Twitter. All right. Going all the way back to Friday. So again, we entered into Memorial Day weekend with Drake as the finale of Invictus launch week, or whatever you want to call it. They're actually not part of Invictus launch week. Whatever, there's lore behind that. We've already talked about it before. Oh boy. Okay. I think I just showed y'all 3 cams on on YouTube. Wrong button. Here we go. To the polls. I asked, and it's every year. Every year that I have been part of Star Citizen during a Drake Day, so IAE or Invictus Launch Week, the question always gets asked about the Battle of the Krakens. So there's a base Kraken, there's a privateer Kraken. And they really are drastically different, right? So the base Kraken can be seen as like a cargo hauler. Yes, it is a carrier. You can launch, aircraft off of it. But it also has a Dragonfly bay. So it has its function. It has a completely unique specific function, but it has 3.8K SCU. So when you think of like a cargo hauler, or when you think of its capability, that's a lot. That's a pretty good, decent sized cargo hauler. But the privateer guts all of that out. So no Dragonfly Bay, no 3.8K SCU. It brings it all the way down to 0.8K SCU. And it puts like merchant, like stores, right? It puts marketplaces inside. So I think Bonnie Merchantman, but in a Kraken hull. So still has the ability to be a carrier, but it changes the interior into something completely different. And so it's a drastic consideration when you're buying a Kraken. It's completely different game loops, and you're spending a pretty penny on the Kraken. So it's a decision you have to make pretty upfront. Like, what is the future of your gameplay going to be? Now you can, a little bit of a pro tip, you can get the base model and then file a ticket through CIG asking for the aftermarket kit to upgrade to the private tier. Okay. It's not in the pledge store anymore because they have the private tier you can just buy straight up. But it's something that I did. And so I have, and this is not a weird flex, but I've got the Kraken base, the Kraken private tier, and I have the conversion kit. Don't ask me why. I just do. So there's no benefit to that of having like all three. But whenever I got the base Kraken, I went ahead and got to the upgrade kit as well to make it a private tier. And then of course you have the private tier. So it's called the conversion kit, I'm pretty sure. So just a heads up there, you can if you want, but that way you're not really committing. You can get the base and then you can have that upgrade kit that you don't necessarily have to apply just yet. So let's talk about results. we talked about the question, but haven't discussed results yet. So 2,200 views, almost 200 votes. We have 72.2% saying the Drake Kraken base, and then we have 27.8% going for the Drake Kraken private tier. Here's what a lot of people are doing. A lot of people are getting the Drake Kraken base and the Banu Merchantman, which will satisfy. It'll suffice for the marketplace game loop. So it's not a bad solution. I also have the Banu Merchantman as well. And so we'll just see. We'll see what happens whenever those game loops come online and what it feels like. Like, I'm not, as much as I like the Banu Merchantman or the alien aesthetic, I think it'll get old quickly. Like living out and working out and having it as like your organization's shopette. I don't know if an alien aesthetic is going to get old quickly or not. So I'm still trying to, I want to figure out, I want to see what the Banu Merchantman end state looks like before I really make that commitment and make an official melt. So question number 1, let's go into poll number 2. This is very recent. This was asked May 30th, so yesterday. So in less than 24 hours, I would say this caught viral. Virality, is that a word? It became viral, but about 2.4K views and about 762 votes. So this one got a lot of attention. But after the roadmap roundup, basically committing, and this is nothing new, but the 323.2 is committing to item banks, freight elevators, cargo hauling, and the persistent instanced hangars. So that made this poll very easy to ask. What are you most excited for in this upcoming 323.2 patch? Undoubtedly the persistent instance hangars, right? The 54.9% voted for the hangars. Then we have 20.7% voting for cargo hauling, 18% for freight elevators, and 6.4% for item banks. So let me stop sharing my screen and let's actually get into a little bit of this. This is, I want to spend the most of this podcast talking about this. This is super exciting. I think this is the patch that we wished 323 was. Now that's not taking for granted what we've gotten in 323. Super happy about the star map and the mini map and all of that, right? I don't want to discredit what we did get in 323. But I think this list, item banks, freight elevators, cargo hauling, persistent instance hangars, I think this is what we actually wanted in the patch, actual gameplay. The hangars alone, it's almost, and let me explain when I say this, don't turn me off, right? It's almost as important as 4.0. Like, I want to warn listeners that 4.0 is going to be one of those things that just kind of gets old after about a month. I truly think that it's just another system. And I've said that before in my podcast. That is not a negative sentiment. That is not a whatever you call the opposite of white knighting. It's not, I guess, salty. It's not a salty sentiment. It's nothing negative. It's one of those things where, okay, you already have Stanton with 4 systems. You're about to have Pyro with a shitload of planets. Cool. Exploration. Awesome. You get solar flares. Great. At the end of the day, it's just a different makeup on the same pig. Horrible analogy. So I think 4.0, where it's important, where server meshing is obviously going to be very, very crucial in the tech pillars for Star Citizen. The additional exploration in the game loops that are in Pyro, all great, all fantastic, but it's just more of the same. Whereas this patch is completely changing the way you play every second that you're in the game. Let's talk about hangars, right? Your hangars is a place for you to live. I've heard, again, this 2.4K views. There's a lot of comments here from other people that are like, I don't understand. Why do we care about hangars? Who cares? It's a place for you to live and exist. All the things that you are getting from the subscriber flare, things that you can buy in the pledge store separately. When you go to a bar citizen and you get the little RF codes to put the Banu box inside of your hangar, all of these things now become relevant. You can decorate your place of existence. You can already decorate inside your ship. We all know how that goes. You blow up your ship, everything else is like gone and lost forever. Well, your hangar is an instanced, which means separate from the live server. It's an instanced experience where it's not possible. Like, no one can like fly in and destroy your stuff inside of your hangar. So you put a couch, decoration, plants, plotter, the potted plants, things that we got a couple months ago. You can decorate your hangar and it become yours. I can see myself spending a whole game session just in my hangar, just decorating, just existing, sitting down, typing in general chat, or maybe in my Discord, my org, right? But being present inside of my hangar. Some of these packages that you can buy from the pledge store comes with wall art, wall hangings, posters. So you're going to be able to hang all that stuff up. The hangars is going to be fun. It's going to be super, super fun. I'm going to skip over cargo hauling and go straight into freight elevators, because it kind of, I tie that in with instance hangars, maybe rightfully or wrongfully, but I tie that in because like freight elevators is like, for me, the number 2. Because all the pain that you have getting ready for an org night. Last night we had an org night with Soul Provision. We were getting things ready for a mercenary night. We were going to go do the 30K or the upper echelon mercenary missions in Hurston. So getting those SU boxes ready, kitted out, extra ammunition, extra weapon systems, armor, that's extremely painful right now. It sucks. You just had the NERSA launch, right? Like the Ursa medevac, we call the NERSA. It launched, but the process of getting that inside of a larger ship takes about 15 to 30 minutes. You have to fly to a mining facility, and you have to call out the NERSA, and you have to drive it onto your ship, and then now you can fly it somewhere. Heaven forbid you blow your shit up, and now you've lost both ships, and you got to redo it all over again. It's a very painful experience. But this instance hangars, freight elevators, this combination of what we're describing. Now, I don't know if that necessarily, the nested claiming or the nested ship spawning, I don't know if that's going to be in this patch necessarily, but this is the future of what I'm talking about. This combination of freight elevators and instance hangars, that is going to solve the majority of my personal gripes with that game loop. So anyways, the other great things about freight elevators is, I mean, pulling in all of your inventory at once, putting that inventory onto your ship, because that's a whole nother thing. Let me just get into that real quick. When 323 first dropped, I pulled out the C2. And what did you normally do? Those of us that are veteran gamers for CIG or for Star Citizen, you would take like a C2 to your primary residence, and you would load it up with all of your gear, and you'd fly it out to an orbital station like Seraphim Station. So you'd go to Orison, you get into your inventory, move all into your C2, and then you'd go to Seraphim Station, move all into Seraphim Station. So that way you're in a less populated, less server intensive location to manage all your inventory. Well, that's not how this works anymore. It's not. You can't do it. So they physicalized the cargo. You actually have to buy the 32 SCU containers. You actually have to walk over to your personal storage inside of your ship in order to access that additional storage. It's a whole different ball game. And so the option now, my recommendation to listeners, leave it in your primary residence. It's not worth the move. And when these instance Hangars comes online, right, in the next couple of days, hopefully, you're going to want everything already inside of your primary residence, because that's where your instance Hangar is going to be, right? Okay, I don't want to belabor that too much. And then you have item banks. I don't know. I don't necessarily see it's gonna be important. It's gonna be easy. It's a way to expedite that subscriber item getting from one location to another. Cool. It's gonna be useful. It's just not. I agree with this being 6.4%. It's not that paramount to the gaming experience. But I will say this: there are item bank locations freaking everywhere. I mean, you can't throw, a rock and not hit an item bank inside of these orbital stations. They're everywhere. There's a shitload of them everywhere. So there is a lot to get excited about in 323.2. Again, according to the SC chat channel on Spectrum, it's going to be an Evocati as early as today, but more than likely next week. That is a quote from the developers. So as early as today, but more than likely next week. Evocati is going to run through it. It's 1 through 5, or its phase, and then it's going to go through EPTU 1 through 5. So I would probably expect this. I would expect this like pretty quick, probably the next 2 weeks, maybe end of June. So mid to late June is my opinion. Because again, Q3 is all about 4.0. I still think 4.0 is right around the corner. I do think Q3 is still going to happen. All right. Let's see here. This is not a poll. This is not a poll, but I do think this is a good segue into the Invictus launch week finale, or yeah, we'll call it the finale. So I created a post. Again, it's not a poll, but I called it the obligatory post Invictus launch week fleet pick. And so I went on to Fleet Viewer, shout out to Starjump Graham and Starjump.org. Again, I've had them on twice. Love what they do, but the Fleet Viewer is their product. And I went in and I created my fleet. So the sole provision fleet, if you will. So I think this is kind of fun. I don't want to make an entire podcast based off of look what I have, but just quickly kind of my thought process here. And so this is not in buyback. This is what I have sitting inside of my hangar at this current moment. In my buyback, I have the whole Echo and the Kraken base. Again, the Kraken base I'll probably leave in buyback since I have the Kraken Privateer. And the whole Echo I'm just sitting on because the whole Delta isn't out yet and I'm having fun flying the whole Charlie. So that'll probably stay my buyback for now as well. But in my hangar in this current moment, right, you got the Javelin. So that is the sole provision org capital ship. Duh. So it's going to be amazing. I think we have a couple of Javelins in the org. So I've got one and I think we have one other. So it's going to be amazing seeing two of these Javelins. Now, granted, it takes like 60 people to run the damn thing. So that'll be interesting. But I can't imagine having 120 Soul Provision members on at once. But that day will come. It'll absolutely come, mark my words. But the Javelin, and then the next one, and I'm going by the largest. So the next largest is actually the Orion. So one of my favorite loops is mining. So first off, salvaging and mining to me feel kind of at the same level. I love them both. I love the solo versions of both, right? So the Prospector for mining, the Vulture for salvaging, love those both. It's very cool, calm, a moment of collection. Like, it's a great experience. So of course, I want to provide the best, the biggest and the best for the org. So here's the Orion. Can't wait for that to come. It'll be a long time. It'll be a long time. It's not necessarily about the game loop. I think mining is where it is, and I don't think it's about game loop having to mature. I think it's the resource management, which is the reason for a lot of these ships not coming online. But there's also a pipeline well ahead of the Orion. So I would not expect the RSI Orion anytime soon. Right under that, you see the Kraken Privateer. I kind of already talked about that through Nausea for this podcast, but the Kraken Privateer is your marketplace, what we're going to be selling with Soul Provision. So there's a lot of us that have the Kraken Privateers. A lot of us have the Bounty Merchantmen. So the idea is that we are provisions for the soul is our tagline, but it's all about logistics. It's all about supplying provisions to the verse. So there you go. And then just quickly after that, we have the Idris. I do have the Idris K aftermarket kit, so I will be absolutely upgrading that with lifetime insurance on the peripherals. So I highly recommend doing that if you have an Idris. But it also puts the K aftermarket kit also puts that massive ass like size 10 cannon at the front of your vessel. So have at it. Then you have the Bounty Merchantman, the 890 jump, and then you've got the Pioneer. So the Pioneer, I think every org needs to have at least one. This, at this current moment, promises an 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer territory for whenever the base building comes online. We have like 2 or 3 of these in Soul Provision. So the idea is that once we have an idea of where we want to put our stake in the verse, we're gonna have like what is that, 24 kilometers by 24 kilometers of like a space to put, to call home. And that's gonna be amazing. And of course the org members can build off of that as they want and as they can. The question I have there is, what the hell does that land grab look like? What in the, like, how in the world? You have persistent entity streaming, server meshing. You already have instanced hangars, so that's instanced. I can't imagine that they're going to instance your plot of land. That defeats the whole purpose, and that's not what they've been broadcasting. So how are they going to manage land grabs? What is that going to look like? So for those of us that have the Pioneer with the 8 kilometer by 8 kilometer, space, is it like a lottery system? Is it first come first serve? Because that's going to suck if I'm on a work trip, in Seattle, and I can't get that plot of land that I absolutely want. So what in the world are they going to do about land grabbing? Next in line, the Endeavor. The Endeavor is going to be your orbital station that you get to fly. Can't wait for that. It's the Lego ship is what I call it. I'm sure a lot of other people call it that as well. But it's this long ass, like, empty vessel that comes with a lot of modules. So now we have modularity online. I can actually see this coming to fruition at some point, coming up pretty quick. But I don't know. There's still a whole pipeline in front of it. But that's going to be fun. And then we get into the Polaris and all the other ships. So Polaris, I think it's starting to get really small on my screen. Let me click on it. There we go. I should have done this from the very beginning. So we have the Polaris, the Reclaimer. That is the Odyssey, Hammerhead, the Pirate Caterpillar, what is that? Galaxy? Yeah, Galaxy, Perseus, which I didn't realize the Perseus is so much smaller than all these other ships. For some reason, I was thinking the Perseus and the Polaris were kind of the same size. They are most definitely not. The Perseus is smaller than the Galaxy and the Hammerhead, and just a little bit bigger than the 600i. So anyways, I thought it's always fun. It's always fun to get into the fleets, the fleet viewers. It's always fun to understand the whys. Like, I will probably always watch or listen to a content creator who gets into their fleet makeup and why they chose those over others. So maybe you see value in that. Ask me questions. Seriously, email me at contact@beyondtheversehq.com. Ask questions why I chose one thing or another. I am very methodical with how I choose these things. Okay, so the rest of this podcast, there's not a lot to cover that we haven't already covered. So we have This Week in Star Citizen, which was kind of a dead week. Monday was Memorial Day, the holiday, and then Tuesday through Friday, it was kind of just keeping the lights on as we end Invictus launch week and have 2 patches in the pipeline. So as we go through this, let's just go straight to the bullet points. So This Week in Star Citizen, Tuesday, we had the Galactapedia update. Wednesday, the roadmap update, and that is it. So there's nothing else. So what I wanted to do, excuse me, I'm dying. What I wanted to do for the Invictus finale, something I did for 14 days straight, was I provided a performance review. So it actually called it the Invictus Daily Review, where I looked at the funding model and the accounts for Star Citizen and measured each day's performance. Now, I am a freaking nerd. I get that. I don't hide it. I don't pretend that I'm not. It's how my brain operates. It's why I'm good at what I do at Amazon. So we're going to get into this. Is how I'm going to address the Invictus final review. I want to look at it through that lens and react to each day, each top performance. And I would love to hear at the end of the podcast, this will be my Q&A. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this kind of daily review. Does it matter to you? Was it a waste of time in your opinion? I enjoy doing it, and I think that's kind of all that matters. But let's get into my beautiful mind. Okay, here we go. Excel spreadsheets. Yes, I live in Excel. I live in Excel 95% of the time when I'm at work, and here I am doing this. So let's go. At the start of the event, we started Invictus launch week May 17th. I'm looking over here in cell Charlie 2. So Charlie 2, May 17th, 2024, we started with a funding of $684.8 million across 5.2 million accounts. Right? And we knew that the end of the event was May 29th, and today's date's May 31st. So there's your top left. Now what we're looking at through columns Golf through Yankee, it's a bunch of numbers and a bunch of bips, and I'm going to get into like what you're looking at here in a second. But this is basic, like if you manage a P&L, the profitability and loss, if you manage P&Ls or you're in some sort of higher level KPI business model, like these numbers kind of should make sense to you. Percent increases, bips, all that kind of crap. But I'm gonna kind of not dumb this down, but I'm gonna kind of simplify this and basically say like your BPS, it's your basis points. It's a way we measure changes of percentages. Right. So for the most part, like a percentage is like a ratio. It's a rate. You have a numerator, denominator, like how they divide against each other. It's very difficult to compare percentages. Like when you say something changes at a certain percentage versus another percentage, things get muddy because it's not apples to apples. So you break it down to a basis point, or you break it down into a contribution to change table. And I don't want to get into CTC. That would probably be an hour-long podcast in and of itself. But for the most part, this is a way that we can compare how one day performed against another day when both the numerators and denominators are changing as volatile as they do. So here we go. Your main focus should be on column mic and on column uniform. These are the bips, the basis points. So what I did is I looked at your changes of funding per day and changes of accounts per day and noted the basis points that they changed by. And so quick analysis, our number one day for funding was the 25th. Saturday the 25th, it was Drake's first day. We saw an increase of funding by 53 bips. That's about $3.7 million in one single day. And so what I do is I use this to help me analyze, well, what happened on day one of Drake? It was the Ironclad. So, I mean, first off, Drake is Drake. Drake will always be a fan favorite. Again, most of the practical ships and the more useful ships are Drake. But the Ironclad came out, and that was a big buzz. It was, I mean, Inside Star Citizen had a whole video dedicated to it. Which we saw in episode 59. It has that cargo mindset with cargo hauling coming up around the corner. And it was affordable. I mean, most people, I think, that I'm close to predicted a $700, $800 ship, but these were $400. I mean, I think it was shocking to a lot of people how affordable, relatively, all you haters out there that think that are going to say $400 is not affordable, relative to the rest of the game. It was more affordable than what we all thought. So a lot of people got it. I myself used store credit, got it, melted it immediately. I think that drove, actually I know for a fact that drove the majority of the success for Drake Day 1. So I thought that was interesting. Close behind that was the Aegis Day 1 for 38 bips, which is $2.6 million. So Aegis, when I think of Day 1, first off, Day 1's always outperformed in every week, or in every event. Day 1 outperformed Day 2. That makes absolute sense. So the Aegis will always do really well because they have two of the limited hull ships. You have the Aegis Idris, the Aegis Javelin. So you have that massive, $3,000 sell, $1,700 sell. So I think that has a lot to do with it, the limited hull ships. But they also had the Saber Firebird, right? And so they had that new Firebird that came out. Whether you love it or hate it, it's still in a very affordable ship that you can go and take care of most bounties, right? Those missiles hit freaking hard, especially now that they went from 12 missiles up to 24 missiles. So they increased the missile count. So I thought that was super interesting. And then I guess third place, or right behind that, was the RSI Origin, Consolidated Outlander, and Argo. And that made a lot of sense because, well, yeah, the Polaris cells. I mean, once people got to see it in game and walk around it, knowing that it's going to be flyable around IAE this year. So the Polaris drove a lot of sales. And then you had the Ursa Medevac. You had the Argo MPUV Tractor. So you had 3 new ships. It was Day 1. I honestly thought this would have won, but it came in third place. Let's look at the other side of that coin, though. Let's look at like the worst days. So let's look at the worst Day 1 performance, and that's Crusader, Tumbril, Mirai, and Misk. So that was 13 bips for Day 1. So we've been talking, 53 bips, 38 bips, 32 bips. So this Day 1 was 13 bips and only $902,000 on Day 1 for Crusader, Tumbril, Mirai, and Misk. So a couple of things that could contribute. Day 1 was on a Sunday. Not a huge gaming day for a lot of people. So you could say that the day of the week had some impact, but it didn't make up for it on Monday. So I would not use that anecdote to support that. Monday was 9 bips at 640,000. So they didn't make up anything in 48 hours. So I truly think it's because nothing important came out. There was nothing new. You had the Mirai Pulse, but that's already a contentious ship because it's just a bike. It's a bike that you would use for racing. It's a bike that you could argue you could, fly from your ship 1,000 meters away to a bunker to kind of close that distance. But I don't know. At the end of the day, it's not going to break the bank. And the Mirai Pulse is only $40, 40 or $50. So you're not gonna break the bank. You're not gonna win, a lot of money on such a low ASP, average sell price. So there wasn't a lot going for this day. However, I would argue that Crusader, this is away from Invictus launch week, Crusader right behind Drake is probably one of the most, behind Drake, practical, versatile. I keep saying merchants, not merchants, manufacturers. Good Lord. And I have the word right in front of me, manufacturers. But Crusader has a good, well-rounded ship line, especially with the new, C1, C1A1. What am I thinking? Well, the other one that hasn't come out yet. I'm thinking of the luxury one, and I can't remember what it's called. E1. So the A1 bomber, the C1 cargo, and the E1 executive transportation one. So those are really practical. You got the M2, C2, A2. Crusader has the MSR. Like, I love the Crusader line. I really do. Tumbrel is like your ground asset for the most part. It's your ground asset, which is not that exciting compared to the rest of these, space aerial vehicles. We already talked about Mirai and Misk. I think the whole sea needs a lot of work. I mean, Misk has other ships, Roger, but the whole series, which is going to be very important, coming up in the next couple of days with cargo hauling, the Misk Sea needs a lot of work. It's still very glitchy. The other day I decided, this is sad because I'm the CEO of Soul Provision. The other day I, for the first time, did a cargo mission with the whole sea. Like the one where you go to the commodity terminals, you load it up and it tells you have to go to the cargo deck, and then you fly to like the Connex area, the orbital station. You have to fly into the blue square, and then they load up the cargo items onto your panels. Then you fly it to another orbital station like that. I did it for the first time ever, and it is super glitchy. I mean, the panels didn't spawn. They were there like virtually, but not physically. Man, there's just a lot of issues with that game loop. So, I don't know. Excuse me as I go off on a little bit of an aside. It wasn't even part of Invictus launch week because they're not military vehicles. But, I don't know. Misk needs a lot of work. So I think the funding piece is super interesting. I think I touched on all the main aspects or things to draw out of the funding, but all to say that you can say moving forward, if you're listening to this podcast or you saw this on socials or see it on YouTube, you can say that Invictus launch week is a $19 million marketing event. It brought in $18,979,159. So we say 19 million. That's incredible. 14 days of a marketing event, 19 million. It also brought on 72,000 new accounts. Now, preface, it doesn't mean that there were 72,000 new players. It just means that there's 72,000 new accounts. So whether you created a second or third account, I don't necessarily know why you would do that. I think I talked to some org members who used it for what do you call, good Lord, that reference, like the free ships when you refer. Yeah, I guess refer. When you refer a friend. Good Lord, I stumbled on that one. But those vehicles, people will create new accounts and then kind of use that as a referral bonus and gift them a lifetime insured Dragonfly as an example. So I've heard that example used a couple of times, but I don't know. I'm confident in saying that out of the 72,000 new accounts, I would say the majority, easily the majority, were new players. So if you're new to Star Citizen, maybe this is your first time listening to Beyond the Verse podcast, welcome in, hang out, join Supervision, join any org, and you're going to find going into 323.2 and 4.0 is going to be amazing if you haven't already fallen in love with the game. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on the Spotify Q&A, socials, emailing me. Let me know if that is an interesting slice, an interesting view of, maybe you wouldn't hear that or see that from another content creator. But if you saw value in that, I personally would love to know. So Invictus launch week, quickly, most of you know that this is an important event to me. I'm just going to share my screen for an aesthetic. But it's an important event for me. 2 years ago when, it was 2952? 2951. Damn, I don't remember, guys. I think it was 2952 when I first joined with Conif. This is the event that snagged me. Pulled me in. I enjoyed everything about it. The lights, the fanfare, the parading of ships, the tours of the Javelin. This, again, 2 years ago, tours of the Javelin. It was just a super impactful thing for a gamer that I have never seen in any other game. And so I really hope this was that event for you. And this was smooth. I would say since 318's debacle 2 years ago, I would say this was a very well done event. Yes, servers were on fire a few times. Yes, there were issues, but nothing like we've seen in the last 2 years. So I chalk this up as a $19 million success, and it bodes well for the rest of this year going into IAE. And this year's IAE will be in 4.0. We will have Pyro at this time in IAE. So, exciting times. In the rest of this podcast, we're going to go kind of quickly. I want to talk just briefly on the Galactapedia real quick. Galactapedia did drop. I had a lot of, not redundant, but like repeated articles. So like the full-length article was Widow. If you've listened to this podcast, we've actually read Widow several times. But it's kind of the story of Jumptown. And just very quickly, it's a real life story where CIG employees accidentally marked one of the items in Jumptown, in Jumptown. They accidentally marked it really, really cheap. So it organically created a PvP event where people were just going crazy and killing everybody. It was an exploit. Actually, let me get into that here in a second. It was an exploit that CIG ended up turning into an actual game loop. So a full-out event. And I think they're calling it now Jumptown 2.1. So there's versions of it that they've improved. It's one of the Org Night events that we do in Soul Provision. But like right now, this is interesting. Right now, there is an exploit. I'm not going to go into what it is. You will never hear on Beyond the Verse podcast about exploitations. I don't want to be part of the problem. I am not going to tell you how to exploit the game. You will never hear that from me. So there's plenty of other places you can go and find it. But there's an exploit going on right now, and a lot of people are saying negative things about it, which rightfully so. But it was an exploit that created Jumptown. It's super interesting when you think of that use case of taking an exploit and turning it into an entire game loop. I commend and applaud CIG for doing so. Makes me wonder what they're going to do with this current exploit. If it's even something that you can flip and turn it into a game loop. But I know, just one way of looking at a problem, right? Two sides to every coin. But back to Galactapedia, just this month we explore 5 Van Duel systems, get an overview of various technologies, sample some fast food, and take a peek at some of the verse's most notorious drugs. There you go. Like I said, we weren't going to spend a lot of time on it. We've already gone past the 1 hour mark, so I'm going to wrap this up quickly with the roadmap roundup. So we're going to end on this. We've already talked about what this is or what has gone in this. They were very transparent in This Week in Star Citizen article that we were just going to be getting the new vehicles that were released. So the MPV Tractor, the Ursa Medevac, and the Saber Firebird. However, they did commit in Alpha 323.2 those items we talked about at the top of the show. Item banks, freight elevators, new missions, which is cargo hauling, and the personal and instanced hangars. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up episode 60. So, oh man, there is so much to look forward to, and really there's an unknown about the next couple of days. First off, in very Star Citizen fashion, they're looking to do Jumptown and XenoThreat at the same time in 323.1 alpha. Good God in heaven, protect us, because it's going to be insanity in the next couple of days. So Jumptown's going down, hopefully in a complete opposite side of the map. That'd be really nice. XenoThreat is going to be at the Pyro Stanton jump point, or at least Jericho, the massive like space station, is going to be located near the Pyro Stanton jump point. So that'll be exciting. But that's right around the corner. And then, like I said, mid to late June, we'll be seeing 323.2, where I think we're all going to be extremely happy with the game loops that'll be entering into Star Citizen. So a lot to look forward to. I hope you found your home here in Beyond the Verse podcast, where you get all your latest news. Follow us on social media, because I'm pretty good at staying on top of like the moment things drop. You're gonna see it from me first, more than likely. It's pure insanity. I don't know why I do that to myself, but it's my commitment to you. But let's do this. Let's wrap things up. So if you would like to become part of the conversation, you can do so by emailing us at contact@beyondtheversehq.com. Respond to our Q&A and polls over at Spotify at the end of every single episode. Leave comments in our YouTube channel. That's /@BTV_cast. I try my best to respond to every single comment that is on YouTube. Not advisable, but whatever, I do it anyways. Follow us on social media on all socials /BTV_cast. What else am I missing? I think that's a pretty good wrap up. Hey, listen, y'all, I hope this finds you well. Safe travels as you traverse beyond the verse. Take care, everybody.